A lot of people have said it has helped them at least start to think about death.
There are times when it romanticizes it, and then there are times it just cold water right in the face.
None of it has been there to shock people. It's just simply there to show that we are mortal.
There's nothing we have more in common than our common mortality.
This was a show that talked about everything that it wanted to.
We were kind of irreverent and naughty. It was almost like people saw through that to the moral core of the show.
The light and dark aspects of human life are equally explored.
I don't think audiences need to be sheltered from difficult subject matter.
I wanted to explore the drama and the beauty of the fact that we're mortal. I wanted to bring death out of the closet. Right after American Beauty had been released, Carolyn Strauss from HBO pitched this idea to me about a family-run funeral home, a show about America's relationship with death. And something in my head just clicked, and I thought, what a great idea. And I just wrote the pilot on spec.
When we got the script and actually read the script, it was like, wow, this is really good. This has all the bones of a really excellent series.
One of the things that appealed to me was, who are these people who are funeral directors, who we hire to face death for us? What does that do to their own lives? To grow up in a home where there are dead bodies in the basement, to be a child and walk in on your father with a body lying on a table opened up and him working on it. What does that do to you?
It was just unlike a show I'd ever seen before, not just in its concept, but in its execution. So we decided to go ahead and make the pilot. When the show came on, it seemed to immediately grasp the attention of the audience.
They were so deeply involved in the storylines that they had to talk about it, and they were worried, they were anxious.
Your father is dead, and my pot roast is ruined.
It's a huge emotional time and a time of crisis, and it sort of sets up the whole thesis of the show.
You get to know these people in the midst of a trauma and get to know them as a result perhaps more intimately, more immediately.
I'm not fine. I'm a whore. I was unfaithful to your father. And now he knows. He knows.
People who have just suffered the loss of a loved one, rather than finding it too difficult to watch, they find the show a source of comfort.
I think the fact that we're human animals who are all going to die reminds us that we're fundamentally connected and gives the show a resonance that's unique.
If the show in any way could have helped people get closer to accepting mortality as the reality that it is, then I think that's a good thing.
The only father we're ever going to have is gone. You can't really accept it without getting your hands dirty.
I think that's a great gift the show's given to viewers, that it's okay to talk about these things. It's okay to think about them. They're not alone, because we all go through those.
Any good series needs to actually become better than the pilot. So as episodes started to come in and I was watching 2, 3, 4 episodes, I thought, wow. In every episode, there was something that I would just go, that was brilliant.
Well, you obviously like some guy enough to have his name burned in your flesh.
I would have done a lot more than that for him.
Given that the show can be a little bit sexually explicit, given that we had main characters who were gay, given that we had, some would say, off-color storylines, we held our breath a little bit to see how the funeral industry would receive us.
There was a lot of publicity surrounding the show, and so I was very interested to see what the show would really be about. And so, of course, I was there day one to watch and see what Alan Ball thought of our profession and how he was going to portray that.
At the beginning, we could not stop talking about it in the industry, absolutely.
They would have discussion groups that were printed about the show. They would judge it for accuracy and embalming techniques.
No formaldehyde smell. I'm trying a new line of chemicals, Millennium New Era.
We were pretty curious as to how they would address our profession and how accurately it would be depicted. And I watched it all the way through. And in fact, it was pretty accurate as far as the professional things that went on during the show. I mean, they really did their research, and a lot of the technical things that went on were great.
I appreciated the diversity of the funerals. There was an African-American family, there were Jewish families. So it was just very colorful and very diverse, and I saw that with his portrayal of the business as well.
Actually, I've had quite a few funeral directors say that they really love the show, and that's always sort of satisfying to think that they're pleased with how we're representing them to the world.
It's very accurate, and it shows the emotions that an actual funeral director goes through. because some people just think that we have no emotions, we're just machines.
I just realized that Alan Ball had definitely done his homework about how we felt and what we did and what personal tragedy was really all about. And yet in personal tragedy, some beautiful and very loving things can happen. And he was able to capture that, and that impressed me, which made me continue to want to watch the show.
Unfortunately, his hours are only 8:30.
I found myself racing to make sure that I'm home at the beginning, because if you miss the rate or the method of death at the beginning, then it's sort of, you try to play catch up on the rest of the show to figure out what happened to that person.
King of the world! Some of the first questions we get when people call is, how did they die? And I thought that was a very clever way to put that in there, because people are always curious about how people die. And sometimes we can tell them and sometimes we can't. Sometimes we don't know.
There are an infinite number of ways to die, and I think we worked very hard to balance serene, quiet, naturalistic deaths with sometimes more violent, certainly more untimely deaths.
That was always fun in the writer's room, and we had a bank of ways to kill people.
I remember the one where the lady died from the blue ice from the airplane. And I was like, I wonder if that really ever happens.
The reality for us is that things like that could very well happen. When we go to work, we never know what we're going to see. Death comes knocking in odd places, so a lot of that was realism for us.
There was a lot of research that was done at the beginning. Our production designer went to a lot of actual prep rooms, and we hired people who work within the industry to be technical advisors. And whenever we were doing anything that depicted any aspect of the profession, they were here on set.
It was very, very important for us to establish that credibility and to be getting the facts right in terms of our depiction of the embalming process.
A lot of things were based on real situations. When the plumbing backed up and blood started coming out of the faucets, that was based on something real.
That kind of out-of-the-ordinary stuff happens all the time, every day, in every city in the world. But as far as what happens in the prep room, I wouldn't say that there really is anything too odd that goes on, because I guess there isn't anything that's too normal.
Doing the show has made it much more informative for me. I used to go to funerals and think, well, how'd they do that? Now I know how they do that.
The portrayal of our industry is quite accurate, especially when they are caring for that deceased person. They show compassion. They have a desire to make certain that that person looks their very best, so that the memory that family has is a positive one.
They trust you with a great deal, and we don't take that responsibility lightly. And I think much of what Alan Ball was able to do with the show depicted some of that. You can never be insulated from the needs and the emotions of that family that you're serving. And that was depicted so well in the show as well. That funeral service and what we do is about serving the living. Caring for the dead, yes, but serving the living.
You made her look so beautiful.
It sort of validated, I think, what we do in a way. I think people really don't realize the level of involvement that we have and the level of care and concern and time that it takes to do what we do in terms of arranging a celebration of life.
We're not seeing and helping people during the good time in their life. It's at the worst time in their life. But when they are able to depict something that is very special, very meaningful, or something that really shows love between people, even though it may be very tragic and very difficult, when they're able to do that and do that well, I think that's extremely powerful.
You're asking me what I want?
Yeah, it's your funeral.
Nate is probably my favorite character because, like Nate, I was not going to go in the funeral industry, and I kind of started in it out of necessity. Any regrets?
About becoming the one thing I never wanted to be? Oh, yeah. Or not, I don't know.
I think he was a little bit jaded from the profession because of all the things that went along with it, being around death all the time, and it made him want to enjoy life all the more.
I've had times when I've thought about doing other things, but you're always drawn back to it.
What's up?
I really enjoyed the Rico character because he was so different than Nate and David were, and I think he offered a little bit of a light to the to the everyday goings-on at the Fisher Funeral Home.
Restorative art is really what our technical term is, and he really took pride in what he did, which is what we do. And he was really able to take that and I think opened the door for dialogue and discussion on really what that entails.
I guess I have a lot more in common with David because he's maybe a little more meticulous, takes it very seriously, which you have to be in this industry.
What?
I'm gay.
Why didn't you ever tell me?
I am telling you.
We've had a very strong sense of identification towards David by the funeral directors we've met who are gay. Because, you know, talk about never thinking you'd see your own life depicted on screen. That kind of blew things wide open for a number of people.
I think he was living a double life. When he came to the funeral home, he was like this straight guy that has to put a facade. And that's the way a lot of us have to do it. And then when he came to his personal life, he had a lot of conflicts.
Don't you have a soul? Of course I have a soul. It's a terrible thing to say about your partner.
Yeah, well, it's a terrible thing to feel about your partner.
I noticed a lot more people in the business owning up to their sexuality. So I think David opened the closet of the funeral industry.
One of the interesting things about this industry is that it's so hidden. One of the great opportunities for us was let's show it. It's fascinating. And I think it would be dishonest to not really show the reality of what it involves. It's a show about funeral directors, embalmers, morticians. Let's see them embalm. Let's see them deal with reconstructing a destroyed face.
We're not even sure what we're doing here.
The most tragic and the most difficult cases to do are ones of suicide and people who have no hope, or any kind of children's deaths.
It's barely 3 weeks.
SIDS?
Yeah.
I remember in the first season we had a baby die.
Oh, Jesus.
And one of the writers was very adamant. He said, you can't do that. You just can't do it. And I said, we have to do it because these people bury children. They bury babies. Babies and children die. We have to show that. To not show it is to be cowardly and lazy.
Michael Engler, the director of the episode, came up with the idea to do everything from the baby's point of view, so you never saw the baby. And it was presented in the most discreet and delicate manner.
Does he look okay to you?
He's just fussing a little is all.
He doesn't look a little funny?
Of course he looks a little funny. That's his daddy's nose.
But you find that when you're dealing with sensitive emotional material, you will simply upset more people when you do it effectively than when you do it in a ham-fisted or caricatured manner.
I remember having a young mother whose baby had just died of sudden infant death syndrome. No rational reason why this happened. And as she held that child with me there, and then until she was ready to let go and to have me take that child, how strong and powerful that emotion and that experience was for both of us, letting her know that she was transferring this child into my arms, from her arms, that she trusted me to do that. And those are the kinds of things that the show can depict. And if you had done any less, then the show wouldn't be as good as it was.
We'd like to be alone with them for a little while, if that's okay.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Please take as much time as you need.
We aren't forced to confront our mortality on a daily basis the way that people in the industry are. In that sense, I find them heroic.
I'm here for you.
Okay, better, but use we're here, not I'm here. You're not their friend. And easy on the touching.
Before 6 Feet Under came on, when I said to somebody I'm a funeral director, their initial reaction was kind of squeamish, and it was kind of odd for them.
You go to shake their hand and they ask you what you do, and you say, I'm a funeral director. They're like, oh.
The new reaction I got after 6 Feet Under had been on was they had a million questions, and they said I would say I'm a funeral director, and they would say, do you watch 6 Feet Under? And it would really open up a dialogue.
Before this, people had no desire to talk about death. And so now, the show not only has given them permission, but more people are pre-planning, advanced planning. They're advanced planning their services. They're advanced planning many more things in their life.
Do you want to be embalmed? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to donate maybe your body to science? It's a perfect opportunity to talk about it.
I'm very sorry about your husband. I know those are just words, but we'll work together with you to give him a fitting tribute.
Thank you. You go and make a show about something that no one wants to talk about and people that no one wants to talk to, and suddenly reverse all of that. It can't help but have a profound impact that you can't even know right now. It's too soon.
I think that 6 Feet Under has actually opened us up again to really talk about death and feel okay about that, that it's not tabooish, that it's not a bad thing, but it is a part of life.
I suppose I'll be gone soon, too.
Oh.
I will. That's okay. It happens.
6 Feet Under refers not only to being buried as a dead body is buried, but in primal emotions and feelings running under the surface. And when one is surrounded by death, it seems like to counterbalance that, there needs to be a certain intensity of experience, of needing to escape. It's Nate with his sort of womanizing. It's Claire and her experimenting with dangerous boys and dangerous drugs. And it's Brenda's whole sexual compulsiveness. It's David having sex with a hooker in public. It's Ruth having affair after affair after affair. It's the life force trying to push up through all of that suffering and grief and repression.
When I started developing Desperate Housewives, 6 Feet Under was very much in my mind in terms of how they wrote those people and the subtlety of it, and just how they spoke and the way they actually said things. The depth Alan went to with the characters was very much an influence for me.
You don't ever think, what if it was Maya, what if it was Lisa?
You can't bring them in here with me, you know? I just want them to be what's good about life. That way I can come in here and deal with what isn't.
And certainly on 6 Feet Under, we were being treated to a lot of scenes that you just had never seen on a show before. They were really taking you to parts of the human condition that hadn't been examined, and that makes for exciting TV. That makes for a passionate audience response. The audience wants to be shown something different, to kind of get in there and provoke them.
We don't like to talk about death. We don't like to talk about being sick. We don't like to talk about mortality.
Our seriousness about death is really our effort to reject the miracle of it. All truly deeply spiritual thinking is embrace it. Go towards the light, and we tend to not only not go towards the light, we run shrieking in the other direction.
The reality is there's only two things that happen in each and every single human being's life, is that they're born and that they die. So there really could be nothing more normal than experiencing a death, because it does in fact happen to everybody.
I think that was something that was really important to Alan, was to be able to say, this is something that's okay to show.
I had witnessed several funerals in my own family that were very much Nathaniel's funeral. If any display of emotion becomes too big, that person is shepherded off into a private room because the subtext is, it's unpleasant, we shouldn't see that, it's too private, it's too personal. It's not nice, and that's really screwed up, because when someone you love dies, a piece of you is ripped out of you, and there's no way out of it except through it.
In America, it's hurry up and go, you know. Well, they died, let's have a visitation tomorrow night and a funeral the next day, and then you should be over it. Well, you're not over it.
I was 13 years old when my sister was killed in a car accident, and nothing prepared me for it, and nothing prepared my family for it. Over 20 years later, that grief came up. I started weeping and I couldn't stop, and it was because I hadn't done it 20 years ago.
One good thing that the show has done is it shows that there's no time limit for grief.
I will relive my dad's death and funeral, even though it was 35 years ago, whenever I visit the World War II Memorial or have military honors for a veteran, and hear the Star-Spangled Banner or and have the flag folded and presented.
I go out of my way to drive back to my hometown to see the grave of my mother and father. And I would probably think beforehand, you know, I don't need to do that. They're here in my heart, they're here in my head. But there's something about physically going to the spot where they are that is becoming more important to me. And I wonder if it's because of this show.
There is a reason that people have stones like this. There is a reason for cemeteries. Sometimes people need to have a more organized place that can help them grieve.
Grieving is a process and something that you have to go through, and it fills you. And when it does, I think you're powerless not to respond to it.
While 6 Feet Under was on, my father got ill with cancer and passed away. And I did watch in a different light. It definitely was a part of my life. It was like a companion in my life.
I wish my dad could have seen this show. I really wish my dad could have seen this show.
There were people that were made uncomfortable by the show, and in a way that's probably a good thing. So if there's one thing the show succeeded in doing over the course of its 5 seasons was never lose its provocative edge.
The last few episodes, the Fishers are forced to confront the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Nate. When I found out that Nate was going to die, I thought, whoa. It's not that some other show wouldn't have done it, but another show wouldn't have done it until the last episode. And it was incredibly powerful.
I was shocked, and I kind of went through the emotions with the characters. I was very, very upset. I actually cried that episode.
Clearly, something went terribly wrong.
What do you think, I killed him?
And David lost it. It had nothing to do with him saying, you know what, I should know how to deal with this. But he was like, this is difficult. This is hard for me.
Is that what you're trying to get me to say?
How dare you speak to me that way?
How dare you? I lost him too, Mom!
He really didn't know what to do, and he does it every day. And so the entire family, they've been in funeral home business all their lives, but they were broken, they were destroyed, and they were hurting because of Nate's death.
Even when life hit him, it couldn't get.
You know what needs to be done, but you are so emotionally grief-stricken that you almost become paralyzed. Even though you may be a funeral director and you know what to do, you need somebody to still come and help.
My dad died 3 years ago, and after he died, it was very, very hard for me to get back to work. And it just makes you more aware of what other people are going through and what they're feeling, and you just aren't prepared at all when someone dies.
They're following in footsteps that they've followed thousands of times with other people's funerals. They are forced to grieve for one of their own.
If you don't get out of this car, you will hate yourself forever.
I know, but I can't.
Yes, you can. You have legs.
I think given what the show's about, the fact that the Fisher family would come so starkly face to face with death like that seems really appropriate to me. And I thought that the portrait of grief was startling.
All of a sudden, life catches up to you and you realize that you're not going to be able to be with that person anymore, and the regret that comes with that, you know, about I'm sorry that I didn't have a real relationship with you. It was such a waste of time, always criticizing you for being dad.
When Nate died, that was very honest and very true and very touching and very real. And that was probably one of the truest portraits of grief I've ever seen.
I want my beautiful son.
And then at the end, by the final episode, they all achieve a moment of grace.
The last episode, people consider it one of the best final episodes of any show ever. And there's so much pressure on the finale because it's the end. Claire is driving away and reflecting on what's ahead and what's behind. The show shows us the deaths of all the major characters.
I just thought it was so appropriately done, and I think it was, frankly, one of the best hours of TV I've ever watched.
It was an excellent way to close the show because you know what happened to those characters who were so much a part of your life.
It so seamlessly wove into Claire's drive. Every shot and every move, the camera just kept going up, up, up. And you got the sense of them all living a full life. And you don't really know what happened in between, and in a sense it didn't matter. And it was all okay.
We really got to take a journey with all of these characters in a way that's completely unique to 6 Feet Under.
How else could it end other than at the end of life comes death? I was shouting hooray at the end.
Whenever someone close to me dies, It's very difficult, but I know it's a part of life. And the show has allowed me to articulate my feelings and relationship with mortality.
It's changed my perception of it in that I've let it go. It's going to happen when it's going to happen, so there's nothing more to do than be focused on living your own life. What's going to happen next will be as surprising as this is, and that's something to be very happy about, I think.
Thank God we don't all go to funerals too often. Thank God we don't sit down with the funeral director every day. But we did watch it on TV every week, and it made, death not such a scary thing to talk about.
No one will ever do a 6 Feet Under again, though. No one can ever break the silence of death like that.
I think that it will reverberate in people's memories for the humanity that it's shown.
We were telling the truth about the fact that we die. Everybody dies, and until you really face the truth of your own mortality, you can't really start to live.